Today we're playing a game called Human Resource Machine. This teaches basic coding concepts without having to actually use real code. I haven't tried it before, so let's see how it goes. Okay, create a new file, pick a picture. Level 1, mailroom. Looks like I write code on the right side of the screen, and I've got 3 boxes I'm trying to put into from the input to the output. So I'll grab one inbox, one outbox, and hit run, I guess. Oh, so it only grabbed one box. So I guess I need reset. I guess I'll do it 3 times. So in real code, I'd probably write some kind of loop, but it probably doesn't teach me that complicated of concepts yet. Okay, looks like it's working. That was easy. Let's try the next level. Okay, it looks like basically the same thing as before, except now I got a whole bunch of letters. Oh, okay, so the jump command, in like a basic language, this would be called go-to, and you'd have a line number. And so this is essentially the basics of a loop. So like I could grab inbox, outbox, and then jump back to the inbox. So then it's just gonna keep looping. I think this should work as long as there's an infinite number of items in the inbox, but before it had to be an exactly 3. And so if it's not infinite on the left side, then at some point it should crash because I should run out of boxes, but yet I'm still trying to carry them back and forth. But I'm assuming they don't want to get that complicated yet. If there was a certain number, I'd have to do some kind of if statement to tell it when to stop. Okay, definitely not infinite. Oh, it looks like I can go faster. That's nice. Okay, even though it wasn't infinite, it's still just quit. So in real code, that would be an infinite loop and your program would never stop. I guess they're simplifying it, which is fine, still teaches the concept. Next level, copy floor. I don't exactly know what it's telling me to do. It wants me to spell the letter bug in the output, so I need to grab this number 4 first. But it told me to ignore the inbox, because these numbers, -99, I don't know how that's helpful. So, I mean, obviously I need to put the B into the outbox, but I need to tell it how to grab that B. I'm assuming it's this copy from command because that is a new command it gave me. Okay, yeah, so it has a parameter. So copy from is basically a function, and it's asking me which parameter, so I can select B for bug. And I would have thought I could type in the number 4, but I had to just drag, but that's fine. Okay, so I'm saying grab the B, put it in the outbox, grab the U, put it in the outbox, grab the G in the outbox. Should work. I'll fast forward it. Maybe I shouldn't fast forward it. I lose the excitement of watching it happen. Alright, next level. Scrambler handler. Oh, I guess the conveyor belt was broken and that's why I couldn't use it last time. Okay, so it's kind of like putting it on the floor as like a temporary variable, and it wants me to put everything in reverse order. So this is actually a little bit more tricky to think about. It only works because there's exactly 6 items on the left and 3 spots on the floor. So I think basically I'm just gonna grab the first 3 items, stick them on the floor, and then, oh, okay, this makes more sense. It says I'm only grabbing 2 items at a time and reversing them. Okay, so I'm gonna grab the inbox, but instead of putting it on the outbox, I'm gonna copy it. I guess it doesn't really matter where I put it. So that's gonna put the 3 onto this first square. And then I'm assuming because I grabbed it off the inbox, it's no longer going to be there. So next I'll grab the number 8 and copy it to the 1 square. And then the third letter, oh, actually, I can just put the next one directly on the outbox because I'm only reversing 2 at a time. So I'll just grab the next one. Also have the copy from. Okay, so the copy from can only grab it from the floor, not from the side. So that's not going to help me. Let me remove that. Oops, I did not mean to clear the whole thing. Alright, inbox, copy to square 1, then inbox goes to outbox. Then, what's confusing to me is I don't exactly know when I say something goes to the outbox, where does that go from, but I'm assuming it's whatever I picked up last. So, because I'm copying from this square that I copied, so I think when I grab from the inbox, copy to the first square, I'm assuming it's actually, even though it says copy, I think it's actually moving it. I hope so, because I don't want it to stay on the conveyor belt. And so that allows me to grab the second item, which is 8, and then that goes immediately to the outbox. And then I grab what's on the floor that I copied earlier, and because I grabbed it, I'm hoping that's what goes to the outbox. So in the end, because I want to keep repeating this process, I'm going to put a jump at the bottom, but let me just test it to see if it works how I think. Okay, yeah, exactly. So even though he copied it, he threw the original one away. So yeah, that looks right. Now I just need to put a jump on here. And like I mentioned before, there should be a condition in a real programming language. There should be a condition that tells it to stop after it runs out of items, but it seems to just do that automatically. Okay, and then even though when I copied from, it left it on the floor, whereas before it actually removed it from the conveyor belt, when it put a new item on that spot, it deleted it. Okay, looks like I passed it. Next level, drinking some coffee. Wait, is this actually a task or just like a video? How do I skip this? Okay, yeah, that was not a real task. It just told me that we're running out of power. Okay, so now it wants me to, instead of reversing the order of the first two items, it wants me to add them together. So instead of 1 and 1 going to the outbox, it wants the number 2 to go to the outbox. So I guess I'll grab the first inbox. Well, let's first check with this new add command what the parameters are. So it only lets me pick one parameter, so I'm guessing whatever I'm holding in my hand gets added to wherever I tell it I'm adding to. So I'll grab one item from the inbox. I'm hoping if I add it to the first square, even though the first square is empty, it'll still add. If not, I'll have to do a copy. Then I'll grab the second one, do the same addition to that square, and then afterwards I need to put it on the outbox. And I'm hoping it automatically, whichever thing I added last is what gets put on the outbox, but otherwise, if not, I'll have to copy from that square before I put on the outbox. So let's just see what happens. Okay, so it won't let me add if I have an empty value. So first I gotta copy that value to the 0 square, which means I don't need to add anymore. So let's try again. I'm guessing when it gets to the outbox, it's gonna say that I didn't grab the value. Oh yeah, it did. So it did automatically take the added value and put it to the outbox. So that works great. The only issue is I have to think about how many items are on the left side here, because I only have 3 squares to work with, and I don't see a value to clear. So after I added it, it's going to be the number 6, which I put on the outbox. Well, before it was 6, I think. Now it says 7 and 4. Maybe these numbers are randomized. So 7 and 4 added together, it's going to be 11, I think. Then it's going to put that into the outbox. The original 7 is still on the ground. So for me to add 0 and 5 together, I need to use the second square because I don't see any ability to erase this first square. But then I'll do the same thing with -6 and 1 onto the third square, and then I have nowhere to do the 8 and -5. So that is a little strange. Now I could fake it if I analyze the numbers ahead of time. For example, here I can see a 0. I could just copy that 0 onto a floor to reset it. The problem with that is if these numbers on the left side are randomized, it's not going to work. So let me... it might be interesting to try this debug sometime, but I don't think I need it yet. So I'll clear this. The first number it gave me was 7. So yeah, now it's 9 and 2, which is 11. So maybe the program doesn't actually have to be generic to where it works with any random input. Maybe it just has to work for the one task at hand. Because otherwise... Oh, this is a help. So if I put jump down here, it gives me instruction. Interesting. So the problem is I don't know how to clear out a value, and I've got more than 3 pairs of numbers. And there's no way to... So I could clear it out by adding a negative number. So if I add 9 and 2 together and put it on the square, I could then add a -9 and a -2 to clear it out. That sounds a little tricky. I don't know if copy from and copy to clear it out. I don't think they do. Something odd about the add command is it didn't... I would have expected after added for it to actually put it on the floor, but it didn't. So like the number at 11 did not get put... Shouldn't get... I would expect it to get put on the floor, but the last time I ran it, it didn't. It just immediately put it to the outbox. So maybe after the add, I need to do some kind of copy. Oh, I guess maybe I can just replace the old number. So I don't have to clear it out, I can just replace the old number. So for example, I grab the first item, copy it to square 0. Grab the second and add it here and then put it in the outbox, right? Then if I I really just have to do a jump because that should have been obvious. So what's going to happen is the next time it's going to grab something off the inbox conveyor belt is going to copy it to that same spot. The copy is going to replace the original value, and then it's going to add the next number. So this should actually work. So 7, it should add the 9 to get, I think, 16, puts it on the conveyor belt. Then it's going to put the 6 and replace the 7, and then add them to get 13. Okay, this should work. I'll speed it up. Looks like it worked. I was really overthinking that one. It actually was really simple. Okay, it looks like I have a choice which direction I want to go. I'm kind of feeling, wow, there's quite a few levels to go. I think I'm feeling the one on the left just because it ends quicker. Okay, it sounds like it's saying this is like a challenge level, it's supposed to be harder. For each thing in the inbox, triple it and outbox the result. Okay, so I'm going to take this first thing of 7, basically times it by 3, and then put it in the outbox. So I could add it to itself 3 times. That should work. So I guess first I grab it from the inbox, and that's going to permanently destroy it until I put it. Like the original value is going to get destroyed, but it's gonna, I can put it to this first spot. So then in order to add, I have to pick something else up to add it, but I really want to add it to itself. So before I do the add, I think I want to copy from that spot. And I don't think I actually need to use the second and third square on the floor, because when I copy from, I think it just makes a copy in my hand, and then when I add, it also just makes a copy in my hand. But I'm not ready to put on the outbox yet until I've added it a third time. Oh yeah, so I just add again. So I first move the 7, because you can't do the add off of the conveyor belt, you have to do it off the floor. So I'm gonna grab it, put it on the floor, then I'm gonna put it back in my hand, because I can only add whatever's in my hand to whatever's on the floor. And so then once I've made a copy in my hand, I'll just add it twice to my hand. So that should give me the tripled value. Then I'm gonna output it, and then I'm just gonna jump back to the top because I have to do it for the -4, 4, and 0. The only one that I'm wondering about is the command add is a little bit weird when you think about a -4, because multiplying that by 3, I guess it works because it should be a -12, and I guess adding -4 to -4 is actually -8, so I think it should work. Nice, at least that one worked. So yeah, it replaces the 7, speed it up, I think I got it. Okay, so it's saying that I could have optimized this by using fewer commands and fewer steps. So I think if I used one fewer command, it would automatically use fewer steps. Okay, let me just see if I could remove one command. It says I only need 6. I'm wondering if maybe I don't need this copy from, because maybe before I was assuming that it always drops something out of its hand after it puts it on the floor, but maybe it's only throwing it out of its hand if it needs to pick something else up. So if I just get rid of this copy from, then when I copy it to the floor, I should still have it in my hand, and so then I can just add 2 times. Yep, okay. So I was confused before about what caused it to throw it out of its hand. Okay, it worked, and that should solve the puzzle with the actual 6 command challenge. And that's a good point. Even in real coding, there are different ways to code the same task that maybe both work, but one's faster or slower than the other. I'll do the next challenge. Those seem like a little more tricky. Okay, so it wants me to multiply by 8 this time, but it's telling me to avoid using too many add commands. So like the obvious answer would be identical to the last one, where I just take the value, copy it to the square 0, and then add it like 7 times, right? But it wants me to only use 3 add commands, but I'm supposed to times it by 8. So, and it's interesting, it gave me more floor space. Normally I only have 3, and now it gave me 5. And it looks like I only have 4, but because the first one starts at 0, I actually have 5. Yeah, that's pretty common for computers to count by zeros instead of 1. So I think the way I could reduce the number of adds would be each time I do an add, it's kind of like I'm doubling it, as long as so 7 plus 7 is going to be 14, right? Instead of adding 7 a second time, if I then take 14 and add it by 14, then I'm doubling it again. So to multiply by 8, well, let's do the math. It's 7 times 8. I'm going to pull up a calculator. I don't think it's recorded in my calculator, but that's the number 56. So if I take 14 plus 14, that would be 28. If I take 28 plus 28, that would be 56. So the first time I double it, it goes from 7 to 14. The second time is 14 to 28. And then the third time is 28 to 56. So I think that would only be 3 add commands. So let's see. Copy it and then add it. Then I'm going to... I think it's when I add it, it's in my hand. So then I'm going to copy the added value to the second square. Then I'm going to add the second square. So this first value will have 7, the second one will have 14. And then I want to put the 14 in the third square. Add that. I think that gives me the final answer. So I put that in the outbox and then jump back to the beginning to do the other items in the conveyor belt. Let's see what happens. 14, 28, 56. Yeah, it looks like it worked. I'll speed it up. So even though this is the correct answer, and something I like about this so far is each level is building on the previous concept, and so if I'm able to understand the previous concept, then I can do the next one fairly easily because I'm just adding one little one little step. But one thing that's a little silly about this particular challenge is, even though it got me to use fewer add commands, it made me do extra copy commands. So as far as the actual speed of the program, I think it would be the same. So I don't see the benefit there. And obviously in a real programming language, you're going to use a multiply command instead of using the add command 8 times. But this is just trying to teach you the fundamental concepts of coding. So I think it's a good example. Even though it's not perfect. So let's do the next one. Okay, it wants me to multiply by 40 and put it in the outbox. Okay, that seems like a pain in the butt. Why 40? So I feel like there's got to be an optimal solution I've got to think of, because obviously I can just paste in the number 40. Like the add here, I can just paste it in 40 times. But that's going to hurt my fingers clicking that many times. And also, this is supposed to be a more difficult challenge than the previous. What's weird is it didn't tell me how many times I was allowed to use the add command. So I guess we should use the same concept as before, just to very quickly get to a large value. So 40 times 3 should be 120. And if I do 3 plus 3, there would be 6 here. And then 6 plus 6 should be 12 here. And then it should go to 24, 48. What is 48 plus 48? Okay, that's 96. So this last one will give me 96. It won't quite be the 120 it's supposed to be. But I probably could add one of the previous values to get to the final 120. And I think that pattern would still work. So I'm going to try that. So after I add the first time, I'll copy to the second one. After I add the second time, copy here. Then, oh, I need to make sure I'm adding the correct one as well. Copy to 3, add 3, copy to 4. So, I mean, this is less painful. It's harder to wrap your head around than just adding 40 times. And in fact, I don't even know what value I'm at yet. I think I'm at like 90 something, so I'm just gonna run it to see. And I know I need to be at 120. Okay, 96. So if I take 120 minus 96, then it's 24. So I just need to add the previous value. And I think that pattern will be consistent. So then I'll just also add the third one here, and then I'll put it in the outbox. So we'll see if it dislikes the way I chose to do it, but I think it should work. There just may be a more optimal solution. Oh wait, that's 240. I went twice as high as I was supposed to. Oh no, let's see, 6 was the original. I forgot, before it was number 3, it re-randomized the number, so now it's number 6, so 240 should be correct. So 6 times 40, yeah, that's 240. So I just forgot my jump is all. Replay, fast forward. 0 times 40, that was a lot of steps to figure out, but it was still 0. Okay, it liked my solution. Okay, so those are challenge problems, so I'm guessing this next one won't be so hard because it's not the challenge. Oh, the floor got different. Okay, anything that's not 0, it wants me to put in the outbox. So these 0 values, it wants me to not put in the outbox. I've got a new command here, which is jump if 0. So I'm not really sure why I need the floor at all, unless this jump if 0 requires, yeah, it doesn't, when I dragged it in, it didn't have any parameter. So it's gotta be just looking at what's in my hand. So I think this is all I need to do. Basically grab it from the inbox. If it's 0, jump back to the beginning, which will grab a new item from the inbox. If it's not, just go to the outbox. So I don't need the floor at all because I'm not doing any kind of math. Oh, I guess I need an additional jump that's not conditional that also goes to the beginning. And in this case, it doesn't matter how I do these loops, because both of them are just going to go to the inbox. But it's probably less confusing to not have the arrows cross each other, just so to visualize it logically, but they do the same thing. Speed it up. Okay, looks like I got it. Interesting, so maybe it's these two. Oh, I'm just realizing the busy mailroom, there's a light that's dark. So maybe all of them are challenges. I accidentally grabbed the same level twice. Maybe all of them are challenges, and this second one I failed part of the challenge. I'm not going to worry about going back. Okay, send only the zeros to the outbox. So this is identical to the last one, except just how I want to jump is going to be slightly different. So if it is 0, then I want to go to the outbox. But if it's not 0, okay, so this is a little weird the way I did my jumps, but basically I'm going to grab something from the inbox. If it's 0, I'm going to jump down, and then if it's not 0, it's going to go to the next line, so that's going to jump back to the top. But because the if 0 jump like skipped line 3, it's not going to jump to the top, it's just going to go to the outbox. So I think that should work. I'll just fast forward. Oh. I got ahead of myself. I wanted to just fast forward because I knew I had the right answer, but I forgot to do the final jump at the end to grab the other items from the conveyor belt. So essentially it's teaching you what an if statement is, but it's teaching you it from the most basic concept, which is a jump. In assembly language, which is the language before C++, or before BASIC, assembly language uses jumps for the way it does if statements because it's more basic. So I guess it's saying I didn't quite pass the challenge because I used too many steps. I don't think I'm going to worry about optimizing it. I'm just going to move on. Okay, now I've got subtraction instead of just addition. So looks like it wants me to subtract the second. Okay, the first from the second, so 2. So it'd be 7 minus 2, I believe, and then go to the outbox. But then it says to subtract the second from the first, so that would be -5, like 2 minus 7. So it wants me to do it in both directions and put each of them in the outbox. So because doing the addition or subtraction modifies what's in my hand, if I pick up a value, well, so first of all, add and subtract have to go off of the floor, but also whatever value's in my hand is going to get lost. So I think I need to drop these down on the floor first before I do the subtraction, because otherwise, if I just grab it off the inbox and then do the subtraction, I'll lose my original value. And since I have to subtract it both ways, I can't lose the original value the first time. So grab it from the inbox, put it on floor, grab it from the inbox, put it on the second part of the floor. Then I can start working on my subtraction. So I'm sure for the challenge it's going to want me to use the fewest commands as possible. So I should think about what's already in my hand. What's already in my hand is the number 7. And it says it wants me to subtract the first from the second. So since I already have the second in my hand, if I subtract this first value, then put that in the outbox, then I need to do the opposite direction. So I think I need to pick up this 0. So that would be a copy from 0 and then subtract from 1. So I'm just doing the opposite direction as before. Put that in the outbox, and then I'll just always jump to the top because I need to do all the conveyor belts. See what happens. 2, 7, 7 minus 2, 5, 2 minus 7, -5. Okay, let's fast forward it and see if I did it right. Looks like I did. So I think, you know, they're color-coded green when you pick them up off the conveyor belt. I assume if I put the wrong value on the outbox, it would color it red or stop my program immediately. So maybe sometime if I get an answer wrong, I'll notice that. Okay, so I think it wants me to grab pairs at a time. So here 5 and 6 would be a pair, 7 and 7 would be a pair, and then -6 and 8 in it as a pair. And then if the two values are the same, put only one of them on the outbox. If they're not, it wants me to throw them away. So like the 5 and 6 would get thrown away and a single 7 would get put. So I don't have a compare parameter in here, but I do have a subtract. So if I subtract the numbers, and I also have a jump of 0, if I subtract them, if it equals 0, then that would mean that they were equal. And in my hand will be the number 0, so I'll need to pick up that original value off the floor and put in the outbox. And then it's saying I also have comments in here, so in case I want to just, have to draw. So comments are essentially to explain to other programmers or even to yourself, like if you don't touch the code for a few months and come back to remind yourself of what you were doing and why. I'm not going to bother with comments, but so I'll grab basically the number 5, put it on the floor at spot 0, then I'll grab the number 6, and I don't think I need to actually put it on the floor anywhere. I can just subtract it from 0, and then or from the spot 0. So 5 minus 6 is going to be either 1 or -1. I'm not sure. I have to think about which direction it's doing. I think it's going to do 6 minus 5, so I think it'd be a positive 1. But regardless, it's not going to be 0. So if it is 0, I want it to put it in the box. But what's in my hand is now the number 0. Well, technically in this case it's 1, and I don't want it to go in the outbox. But if it were 0, I don't want the 0 to go with the outbox. I want whatever was on the floor to be in the outbox. So I'll have to copy from the floor first in that spot and put that in the outbox. So if it's 0, I'm going to do this copy. And if it's not 0, I'm going to go back to the top of the program and grab the next item. And then at the very bottom of the program, I'm also going to go back to the top. So I think that should work. Okay, so I got my number 1. It says it's not 0, so it skips over, it puts the 7 down. This one, it should be 0. So it grabs the 7, puts it in the outbox. Okay, perfect. Looks like I got it. Year 13, we're moving forward quick. Okay, so it's saying I could have removed one single step to optimize it slightly better. But again, if it's working, I'm not going to worry about making it perfect. Like optimizing it for speed. It's fast enough, it just did one extra step. When you think about, programmers get paid a lot of money. And so if there's not a difference that's noticeable to a human in the speed, then it's probably better to move on to your next task rather than trying to optimize it to be as fast as possible. I mean, computers get, they double in speed every couple of years. So, if it's noticeably slow, you should fix it. But if it's good enough, just move on. Computers are not nearly as expensive as a human. Paying the salary of a programmer for a whole year might be over $100,000. Buying a computer is $1,000. So if your program's too slow, just buy a faster computer. It's cheaper than having your programmer, modify the code, unless it's like super slow, or it's like a really easy fix for the programmer to change it. Okay, so it looks like I have more commands. I have jump if negative now, and it's saying that I want to take 2 pairs of numbers, and whichever one's bigger, that's the one I'm going to put of the 2 into the outbox. So essentially, if I subtract them, the negative should tell me which one is big. So I'll grab the first number and put it on the floor. Then I will grab the second number and subtract it from what was on the floor. And then I just have to think about the order here. So 2 gets put on the floor, 9 is in my hand. Now I'm subtracting 2, so 9 minus 2 would be 7. So the negative in this case would actually mean that the second one was smaller, but because it's positive, it means the second one's bigger. And I want the bigger one to go in the outbox. So if it's negative, I want it to go into the outbox. But if it's Oh, this is a little tricky too, because if it's not negative, I need to grab. So the one that's in my hand is what's going to go in the outbox. Oh, actually no, because I subtracted. So the number 2 is still on the ground. The number 9 is not in my hands anymore because I did the subtraction. It's now 7. So I've actually lost my original number. So before I do the subtraction, I actually need to copy it to the second part of the floor. So then I'll say if it's negative, then I want the second value. So I'll grab the second value and put it in the outbox. And then if it's not negative, I'll grab the first value and put it in the outbox. And then in both cases, I just want to jump back to the top so that it does the other numbers. I think that should work. Oh, I think I got it backwards. So I grabbed the number 2 and it wanted me to grab the number 9. So the proper thing to do here would be to like do this debug and figure out what I did wrong rather than just guessing. But I mean, it's pretty obvious that I just grabbed the wrong item here. So just swap which item I'm copying before I put it onto the outbox. So debugging kind of lets you step one task at a time and see the result, and you can see it while it's just doing play, but the problem is it's going too fast. So if it's going too fast that you can't think that quickly, then that's when you would do the debug. But you can kind of see this green arrow is showing which command it's on. So you know, even without debugging, you can kind of get an idea just by visualizing what's happening. And it was nice, like the very first time I put a bad value on the outbox, it immediately gave me an error. So I didn't have to watch the whole video to see if I made a mistake or not. So same as before, it's saying I could have optimized it. Maybe someday I'll go back and find an optimal solution, but I just want to move on to the next task. So I think this is just another coffee break, so it's not actually going to give me any task. Just have to watch it. Ooh, scary. A massive army of machines are outside of our building, but they're not communicating with us. Wonder what that means. Are we under attack? Let's do the challenge on the left first. No new commands. Put a 0 in the outbox if they have the same sign. So if they're both positive or both negative. Do a 1 if they're different signs. So again, we're each, you know, grabbing 2 pairs of items at a time. So this first one, they have opposite signs. So that I need to put that 1 out, and then the second one, -2, -8, they have the same sign, so I put the 0 out. It's nice they put the 0 and 1 on here in the floor for me. Otherwise, I don't know how I do it. So grab a value, put it on the floor, grab another value, and since the 7 itself doesn't need to go to the outbox, it's a 0 or 1, I can just do the math. I think I need to subtract them, but now I'm wondering, can I do that? So like, if I add -7 and 7 together, it becomes 0. So I'm not sure by adding or subtracting that it really tells me that they both had the original same sign. I feel like I almost have to add or subtract them from 0 to figure out what sign they have. Or, oh, actually, I could do jump if negative. So if I grab the -7 and it's in my hand, I can do jump if negative to tell me if it's negative. And if it doesn't jump, then I know it's positive. So then I can do the exact same thing. When I grab the next number, which is 7, and do the jump if. So I think that's so it's going to be kind of complicated code, but basically, and this is actually a good point to think about adding a comment. So I wish I could type in here, but I'll just type negative. I'll draw a negative. Okay, so so if it is not negative, then obviously it's positive. So in both cases, I'm going to grab another item from the inbox, but if the first one was positive, then I'm only going to put, well, I guess, depending on if it's positive or negative, for the second time tells me if I'm using a 0 or 1. So I'll say jump if negative, copy from, and outbox, and then jump back to the beginning. Copy from. So I'm not actually picking the correct 0 or 1 yet. I'm just getting the overall structure correct for. Okay, so I've done the positive branch. I'll basically do identical for the negative branch, and it actually looks like I have a copy command here. Oh, I guess I can't. Well, can I paste it in here? I guess I probably can. Okay, it looks like it's going to clear out my whole program if I paste, so that's not going to help me. I was hoping I could just, oops, didn't mean to drag that. I was hoping I could just select a few line item, a few commands and paste them. So let's just step through this. I've only done half of it so far, but grab the first item. If it's negative, jump down. So we know we are right now in the positive section. Now grab another item. If it's negative, jump down again. So that means we've now got 2 positives in a row if we're on this copy command. So 2 positives in a row should mean they're the same sign. So that should mean a 0. And maybe there's a better way to do this. This is just what came to my mind. So I'm supposed to grab this 0 and put it in the outbox. Now, because I've put something in the outbox, I'm ready to move on to my next pair. So I'm going to jump back to the top of the program. So this next jump was if it went from positive for the first and negative for the second. So in that case, instead of grabbing a 0 like we did here, we're going to grab a 1 because the signs are different, put in the outbox, and then again jump back to the top of the program. So now if the very first number was negative, it's jumping me all the way down here where I've got this comment that says negative. So I'm going to do the same structure as before. So we had inbox, so I'm just going to do jump if negative, copy outbox. I'm just going to do it like identical and just change it slightly. So negative, copy, outbox, jump, copy, outbox, jump. Okay, so this should be the same. I just need to move my jumps to where they go and copy from the right place. So the first value was negative, and then let me get these correct first, the jumps. Okay, so if the first value is negative, I'm going to grab the second value. So that actually matches our real case here. -7 is the first, +7 is the second. So jump if negative down, it's not, so it's going to basically be negative then positive. So in that case, I believe I'm supposed to give it a 1. So grab the 1, put in the outbox, go back to the top of the program. Now if it was 2 negatives in a row, instead I'm going to grab the 0, put in the outbox, and then again jump to the top of the program. So I think I'm done. Let's see what happens. It looks like it's working because it hasn't given me any errors, so I'll let it finish. Nice. Okay, so there was a much more optimal way of doing it than what I did, but it might hurt my brain to figure out a better way. So sometimes you don't need to worry about what is, you know, someone else might have a different idea than you, and it's good to ask for advice, you know, or brainstorm before you start coding something. But in the end, if it works, it works. So maybe there's a better way I could have done it, but I chose that way and it worked. And something might be faster, but it could also be harder to understand. Like, to be honest, the last solution I just created, I felt like it was confusing. Like it was not easy to understand. So, you know, I think the most readable solution is the best solution, and then afterwards, you know, the fastest solution, unless you have a specific reason it needs to be faster. So, yeah, my last solution probably could have been better. Okay, so it wants me to output all of these values from the left to the right, except that it wants me to convert them to positive if they're negative. I'm wondering if I subtract it from itself, if that would convert it to positive, but I think I'd have to do it twice. So like -1 minus -1 is the same thing as +1. So that would make it 0. And then if I minus it by -1 again, it would do another +1, which would change it to +1. I think that's the right way to do it. So I'll grab it from the inbox, and if it's positive, which I don't have a jump if positive, so I have to use the jump if negative. But I'll say if it's positive, then it's just going to go straight to the outbox and then back to the top of the program. If it's negative, then I think I want to subtract it from itself twice. But when I do the subtraction, it modifies what's in my hand, so I have to put it on the ground first. So I will put it on the ground, then I'll subtract it from itself, and then subtract it from itself again. I think that will turn it to positive. Then I'll put it to the output, or outbox, and then I'll jump back to the top of the program. I think that should work. 1 goes over. I'm hoping that this changes to 0 and then +1. Yep, okay, nice. It says I could have used 1 fewer command. I'm happy. Ooh, I get a sabbatical. So instead of a coffee break, I get to sit on the beach. I would be excited, but this beach looks kind of nasty and ugly. I'm not going to say anything derogatory about those ladies, but you can decide for yourself. Yeah, this beach is not very attractive. And am I drinking hot cocoa on the beach? That's kind of a weird mug. I would think I'd be drinking a pina colada, but who knows. Okay. Oh, this one's weird. So I got 2 new commands called bump. I actually don't know what those mean, but I'm guessing it's kind of like adding it by 1 or subtracting it by 1. So if I drag this down to the question mark, it'll tell me. Yep, I was right. Okay, so it's just adding or subtracting 1 to it. And it's saying it wants me to output like a countdown. So if I grab this number 2, it wants me to count, I think, down to 0. So like I put out 2, then 1, then 0. But it says if it's a negative, I need to go up to 0. So -6, then -5, -4 until it gets to 0. Okay, interesting. So I'm gonna grab number 2, and I am gonna put it in the outbox, but first I need to put it on the floor, I think. So I'll put it on the floor, then put it in the outbox. Then I'm going, if it's, okay, first of all, I need to know if it's negative or not, because in the case of -6, I'm going to have different logic. So I'm going to skip over this outbox if it's negative. So first I'm going to deal with just the positive case. So put it in the outbox if it's positive. Then I'm going to, because it was positive, I'm going to subtract 1 from it. And I'm going to put it in the outbox again. But I need to be careful here because, so the first, and then like, I'm going to have basically a jump that keeps subtracting by 1 and putting in the outbox. But what I need to be careful of is I want to stop jumping once this value becomes, I guess I could do it once it gets to 0. I was going to do it for negative, but then I was nervous in this case, like when I'm going from -6 up to 0. I don't have a jump if negative, well, sorry, I have a jump if negative, but I don't have a jump if positive. So actually the jump if 0 would be better because it should work in both situations. So jump if 0 to, I'm basically just going to be done with the whole program if it's 0. Well, not with the whole program, but back to the beginning of the conveyor belt, the next item on the list. So, and then if it's not 0, I'm just going to jump back to the bumping -1. So like in C++, you would just say negative to subtract 1, and then, or plus to add 1. And that's where C++ gets its name, is from that shortcut of plus. So grab the 2, put it on the floor. It's not negative, so it's going to move to this outbox. Put 2 on the outbox, subtract 1 from that floor, put it on the outbox, which will be a 1. And then it's not 0 yet, so it's going to skip this jump and go to this jump, which is going to tell it to subtract again. The only issue here is, I think that this will work in this example, but if this were the number 1, the very first time it's going to bump it and put it in the outbox. Actually, that would be fine too, because that would go to 0. So I guess they should be if this was a 0. If it put a 0 down here and then put it to the outbox, it would subtract it to -1, and then it would put it in the outbox, and then it would not be 0 because it's -1. So it would keep jumping up here, and it's going to keep subtracting. We'd have an infinite loop where it just kept doing, you know, every negative number until -infinity. So I actually need to check this 0 condition earlier. So if before I even bump it and output it, I need to, if it's 0, I need to quit out. The problem with that is, okay, that's fine. So, and then the second jump, I need to make sure that the second jump goes above the jump if 0, so that it still checks for 0 every single time. So this should work, and then this only handles the positive case, so now this negative case I need to handle, and it's going to be identical as before, just with slightly different parameters. So it's going to go to the outbox, then it's going to jump if 0, then it's going to bump it up instead of down, and then it's going to go to the outbox, and then it's going to jump back to the top here where we were. Okay, so this jump if 0 should go to the top of the program, and then after it increments by 1 and then puts it on outbox, it should loop basically to jump back to where it's adding 1, and it keeps doing that until it gets to 0. So I think this should work. Empty value. You can't jump if 0 with empty in your hands. Okay, I guess that makes sense. So because I've put it on the ground, or put it on the outbox, I can't check what was in my hands. That's a little annoying. So I need to do the condition first before I drop it down. So I have two ways I could solve this. Okay, I was gonna say I could cheat by just rearranging where I do the jump if negative, but I intentionally put in this order to solve the situation of 0, which I got an example of 0 here, so I do have to think of that scenario. So I guess anytime I'm gonna do a jump, I need to first just grab the value off of that floor a second time. So when I have so I don't actually have a copy from, just a copy to, so I just need to add a copy from that grabs it off the floor. I have to think of where to put it. Basically, as soon as I put it in the outbox, it's no longer in my hands. So right here, this jump if 0 is not possible until I copy that value first. And because when I'm doing the bump, it's not like an add or subtract where it's only getting put in my hands. It's actually modifying the value on the floor, so it's fine for me to just copy directly from the floor, because that should always have the value in my counter. So, you know, bump is technically a shortcut to basically doing a copy from the floor, subtract, and then copy back down to the floor. So it's just a shortcut, which is nice. I mean, programming is all about shortcuts because your code gets really, really long if you don't use shortcuts. So typically the way you do that is you'll take a whole bunch of code like I have here, and where it has this like copy and paste concept, you would basically copy the whole thing and put it into what's called a function. You know, bump and jump and add, those are all like functions. So I would basically create a function for all these commands, and then I could reuse that function so that like internally you can inspect what the bump commands does, but you don't need to. You can just trust that it, you know, does what it's documented to do without actually reading the internal code. So anyways, after this outbox, I need to do the same thing, which is the copy from, and I think that should fix my program. Yeah, looks right. Perfect. Yeah, it might tell me I didn't do the optimal solution. We'll see. Yeah, not optimal, but it still works. Okay, next level. Okay, next task, multiplication workshop. Okay, so it sounds like I can now put labels on the ground, and the benefit to that is essentially what's on the ground is like a variable in a programming language. And so by giving it a name, it'll help me remember what I'm doing and why. So it wants me to take two groups of numbers and multiply them together. This actually seems a little bit tricky. I think I don't know why it already put some code in here for me. It doesn't seem like useful code, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is basically a loop to do the multiplication. And when you think about the fact that it's building skills on top of each other, previously I had to learn how to count down to 0. So I'm gonna use that very similar code. So if I wanted to, I could hit back, I could come into this countdown, and I could copy the entire section of code, and then I could go to this new one, which is the multiplication, and I could paste it all in with just some modifications, because essentially to do multiplication, I kind of want to count down to 0 while adding to itself. So I'm not sure why I need this variable that starts with 0. Doesn't seem like that's necessary, but so let's just make a few variable names here. So one I will call result. Anytime I write a function, I typically just make a variable called result, and that's like the final value. So that's like the multiplied value. And then I want to make another one that's the count. I would say count down, but I just don't have enough space to draw. So I copied everything in from this other program, and I only wrote it a couple minutes ago, but I've already forgotten a little bit about how it works. But it basically, that's gonna go into my count, and it's what I'll use to like bump up or down to get down to 0 when I know I'm done. So I guess the first thing, okay, when it reads in a value, copy. So instead of copying it to 0, I think I want to copy it to the count. And I think I still do need a difference between negative and positive because it either needs to count up or it needs to count down. And then I'm technically adding the value to itself, so I think I might also need a variable of like what it is I'm multiplying. It's important to have variables that have good names, but I honestly can't even think of a good name for this. Like when you're multiplying, so I guess here's something I could think of. A lot of times when you do multiplication, so you have like a variable A times variable B. So I could think of B as like the count, which is how many times I'm multiplying, and then A as like the original value that's being multiplied. So I guess I'll just call it A. So at the very beginning, I'm going to grab from the inbox and then put it on A. Then I'm going to grab from the inbox again, and I'm going to figure out if it's negative or positive, so it knows if it's counting up or counting down with that bump command. And so these bumps should actually all come from the count. In the previous program, I was just using that top left space on the floor, but it really should have been the count. And then as it's counting up or down, I need to, in addition, basically add A to the result. So the initial value where I copy it to A, it's essentially also getting copied to the result. And then each time I bump the count, I'm going to, before I output, because as I was counting, I was putting it on the screen. I don't need to output it anymore. So those can go. But after I bump it, I need to grab what's in result, add A to it, and then put it back into results. So I'll read A, then I'll add result, and I'll put it in result. And I'll put those same three commands after this other bump down here. So read, and technically I could do it in either order. I could read result and add A, or I could read A and add result. Doesn't technically matter. Oh, and yeah, but when I copy from, it's putting into my hands, and when I add, it's putting into my hands. So that's why I have to do the copy to afterwards. I feel like that's everything I need except for the final output. It told me not to worry about negative numbers. I already coded it for negative numbers. Or did I? Because when you multiply, yeah, I think I did handle negative numbers. So it told me not to, but whatever, I already did. I was worrying about if when you multiply, if it changes the sign from positive to negative, but it shouldn't. It would stay the same. So the only thing I need to do is output it. So I need to know when is it all the way done. And I guess that would be where it does this jump if 0. So originally these jump if zeros were up here. It should have been up here at the top because it's like grabbing the next number. The only thing is, I actually kind of need like an outbox right here, so that after it's done doing all the multiplication, it's gonna put the final value in the outbox. The problem with that is because I'm jumping to the top of the program, the very first time the program runs, it's also gonna output, but it hasn't even grabbed anything from the inbox or multiplied it yet. So I can't put the outbox there. So instead, what I'm gonna do is do the outbox at the very end, and then put a jump at the end to the very beginning. And then the ones that jump to when they're all done with the multiplication, I'm gonna put them at the end. So when the multiplication's done, it'll outbox and then go to the, okay, I think that's everything. So I really should have solved it from scratch, and then I could have not even thought about, I'm gonna pause it real quick. So I should have solved it from scratch, and then I could have not even thought about the negatives, which would have simplified this quite a lot. So it's definitely gonna tell me that this is not the optimal solution because I actually handled negative numbers. So, you know, maybe it's good or maybe it's bad that I copied the old code. I don't know. It was similar enough to reuse the logic, but maybe I should have started over. But anyways, let's just watch it and see if it works. So it grabs the 2, puts it in the A. No, wait. Okay, so I wish there was a pause button. I should have done the debug. I got nervous because it was putting 2 into result, and I thought that was wrong, but it actually was correct because it's actually the second value is what goes into count. So it actually was fine. So 4 should go into A and result, and then 5 should go into count, which is, oh, it threw 5 away and put 1 into count. So it actually is wrong. Oh, it's because I've got 2 inboxes here on accident. I'm not sure how I did that. So 4 goes into A end result, and then 3 goes into count. So when it was grabbing the inbox the second time, it was throwing the value away. So now it's decrementing it to 2, adding them together, decrementing it to 1, adding it together, and decrementing it to 0, adding them together. And then it should put that on the outbox. Oh, it put the 0 on the outbox, which is not correct. The second thing I need to figure out is, so before I do the outbox, I need to read the result value. So I'm going to rerun it again, and what I need to pay attention to is if the final result is correct. So in this case, it should be 2 times 2, which is 4. So if it goes up to like 6, then I'm actually counting 1 extra time. 4, that's good so far. Okay, so it is actually adding 1 extra time, so it's putting 6 on there when it should have put 4 on there. So maybe to simplify this, since it says I don't have to worry about negative numbers, I could delete half of this. But the important thing, I think I will. So jump if negative, this command goes down to here. So I think all of these, oh yeah, okay, so I think all of these commands here can be removed, because that's the negative situation, which we don't care about. Jump if negative is not necessary. So I just need to think about how, oh, so I think the reason it's incrementing it 1 extra time is because I put the value in the results initially. So instead I should just put the value 0 into results initially. The other way I could do it is I could just immediately bump the count before I check if it's 0. So both of those situations, both of those options could work. If I had like a jump if, yeah, if I had different versions of jump besides 0 and negative, then maybe I could also prevent it from doing it 1 extra time. Because normally in like a C++ type language, you would have a loop that's either called a for loop or a while loop. And for does it a certain number of times, and so you could say like 1 to 10. But where while, you do a specific condition, and you can type up any type of condition you want. But those conditions, you can do a greater than, or you can do greater than or equal. And so in this situation, normally when you're just doing it 1 extra time more than you want, you would just change it from greater than or equal to just greater than, so that it skips over. So like I'm counting down to 0, I basically would say skip over the, when it gets to 0, just only do it when it gets to 1, essentially. But I think the easiest way is I'll just grab the number 0 from here, and I'll copy that into result. So rather than copying the number 4 into result, I'll copy 0 into result. That will prevent it from multiplying an extra time. There's probably more than one way I could have done it. And it's funny, in the very beginning I said I didn't know the purpose of the 0, but I ended up using it, so I guess they knew what they were doing. So the number 4, I think it was supposed to get multiplied 3 times. I wasn't paying close attention, but if so, that would be 12. Maybe it was 4 times. Let's see if it gets it right. All right, 16 goes into outbox. Okay, you didn't give me an error. So next it's 9 times 9. So if I remember right, that's like 81. So yeah, the count starts at 9, goes down to 8. So I'm gonna speed this up and just see if we get an 81 on the right side. I think we should. Yep, yeah, I think I got this. It's kind of fun to watch the guy jump around and do all these weird things, but it helps you kind of think through the logic. Obviously, this is the worst possible way to do multiplication, is to add the number over and over again. There are shortcuts to do it faster, but it's trying to teach you the concepts. I'm pretty sure like in the next round, it's going to give me a function called multiply, so I don't have to do it this way anymore, because in essence, I've now figured out how to multiply using addition. Now that I've learned that, I should be able to just use the function for multiply directly instead of doing the complicated way with addition. So not the optimal solution, but good enough for me. It looks like I'm at a crossroads again, and looking at the rest of the game, it looks like I'm about halfway through. I've got the green area to solve and a little bit of the blue area, and I already solved the yellow and half of, most of the blue. So I think it's a good stopping point. I think I'll do a round 2 to finish up the rest of the game, because we've been going for about an hour now. That's probably long enough, but stay tuned for the next one. I do think this game is actually kind of fun, and it honestly does teach you the basic concepts of programming. It more is teaching you how to think. So whether you're going to use C++ or JavaScript or Python, it doesn't matter. In every case, you need to think like a programmer, which requires solving logic puzzles in a way. And that's exactly what this is doing. So even though the actual commands, like that bump command, it doesn't actually exist as far as I'm aware in any programming language, but something extremely similar does exist. Like in C++, it's the plus plus or minus minus. It does the exact same thing. So knowing the concepts and knowing how to think logically is what's important. And later on, you can learn the actual syntax and names for everything in the language. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any suggestions on other games that I should play. I think this one's pretty good if you want to pick it up. I bought it on sale from Steam. I think it was like $5, so totally worth it in my book. So thanks for watching.